Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Jordan, and today I've got an update to a video that I did about a year ago where I predicted books that I thought were going to be 5 stars. This is definitely not a new concept, so I'll link a couple similar videos below, but I have read all 10 books that I mentioned in my previous video where I thought they would be 5 stars for me, and I have updates about whether or not they actually were. So I'm gonna go ahead and talk about individually each book first, and then I will talk about kind of as a whole how I feel my tastes have changed and how I would predict 5-star books going forward. So the first book that I predicted would be 5 stars is Too Late by Colleen Hoover. This is a darker romance book. So Colleen Hoover, if you're not familiar, is one of my favorite authors, but she writes hard-hitting emotional romance books. Typically, she has delved into some other genres, but she primarily writes romance, and I have really loved a couple of them because they are darker and more emotional. I was told this is the same way, and it is. The story itself is a lot darker, the subject matter, but what did not work for me in this book is specifically the format that it was written. So there is an author's note at the beginning of this book where Colleen Hoover talks about this is a book that she never actually intended to publish. The way she wrote it is she wrote it in small segments and kind of published it online for free and just worked on it incrementally as she had time and needed breaks between her other books. So this was never intended to be its own actual novel, you know, published in paperback or anything like that. And you can definitely tell when you're reading it, especially because there are like 5 to 10 epilogues at the end of this book. And just the format in general, all of that just didn't work for me. I really prefer books that are, you know, well thought out, and each scene and everything has a purpose, and just because of the way that this one was written, it was impossible for it to have that, you know, because she wrote it in short bursts and she put out exactly what she had written once she had written it, so she couldn't go back and change things if she needed to later to make it, you know, make sense with the plot. So I still don't think this is a bad book. I give it 3 stars, and I know a lot of people really did love it, and I do agree that it is a darker, more emotional romance. So again, I enjoyed the subject matter part of it, but the way it was written and just how it all came together, unfortunately, it did not work for me in a 5-star way. The next book that I talked about in that first video is The Gracier by Kim Liggett, and this is a YA dystopian book about this community where girls, once they turn 16, they are taken away for a year to basically live that year on their own and to do whatever they have to do to mature and come back as women. And there's a lot of mystery about what happens during that grace year, and so this book is following one of our main characters as she turns, I think it was 16, and goes on her grace year, and we find out what happens. The thing about this book for me is that I absolutely loved the first quarter, and I really enjoyed the last quarter, but the whole middle half for me did not work. And I don't want to go too in depth as to why, because I'm sure that could be considered spoilers, but I'm happy to talk about it if you want to, you know, comment and have a conversation down there, not within the video. But I was really hopeful this would work because I love dystopian premises and books, and I was really excited to have, you know, a modern and brand new dystopian book to really sink into, but unfortunately it disappointed me. So I also gave this one 3 stars. Okay, and then the next one to talk about is Night Film by Marisha Pessl. So this is a mystery thriller book that is about these people who are digging into the mystery of this really famous director's daughter who was found dead. It was declared a suicide, but they don't think it was a suicide, and they think that this director's films or something might have something to do with the way she died. It's been a little while since I read it, so I don't remember completely, but I thought I would love this because, one, that premise sounds really interesting to me. I love a good in-depth mystery thriller. This book also has mixed media elements, which I thought would be really cool to read, but it was just a no from me. I gave it 2 stars actually, not even 3. First reason why is because it was like almost 600 pages and felt like it. It felt extremely long and drawn out, and it was very confusing. It took a lot of different twists and turns and not in a good way, just in a kind of meandering feeling way, and I just couldn't really keep up. I didn't really know what the purpose was for all of it, and the payoff at the end was absolutely not worth it in my opinion. So this one, not a 5-star. I have read Marisha Pessel's other book, Never Rolled Wake, which I mentioned being excited for in the same video, and that one was 5 stars, oddly enough, but I hadn't included it in this actual list. This one I had, and it was a 2-star. So as you can see, we're off to a very strong start to this video with 0 for 3. The next book that I had talked about is All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda. So Megan Miranda is a mystery thriller writer who I've read a few of her books at this point, I think 3 or 4. And of all of them, I had heard the most good things about this book. It's kind of your standard domestic-ish thriller, except it is told in reverse order. So you start the book on day like 15, and then every chapter is a previous day, which is a super unique way of telling a mystery story, and kind of starting out with your twists and then working backwards to figure out what that twist actually means. And this one, I'm happy to say, for the most part, worked out for me. I gave this 4 stars. So not quite 5, but I did really enjoy it. I thought that that unique way of storytelling actually really worked. And so I agree with the masses who say that this is Megan Miranda's best book, at least that I've read so far. And I would especially recommend it if that reverse order storytelling way seems like it'll work for you. And I will say that I can sometimes have a problem with remembering details and really keeping things straight. So if you're worried that something like this sounds like it would be confusing, let me reassure you that it is told in a pretty digestible way, and it did all come together for me in the end, which is probably reassuring if you are worried about that. All right, and then the next book that I talked about is actually the last backlist book. I had separated the first video into backlist books and then new release books. And so this was the last backlist, and it is Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. I'll admit that I was kind of sucked in by the hype of this book. BookTube definitely talked a lot about this book. Books and Lala talked a lot about this book, who I absolutely love and adore. But I'm coming to find out that my tastes and hers maybe don't always align the best, and this is a good example of that. This is kind of a science fiction, kind of a fantasy, kind of a mystery thriller. It's a little hard to pinpoint it exactly, but it is about these 2 twins named Roger and Dodger who were created and have these kind of magical powers, and I guess just about their life. This book, really similarly to Night Film, felt very long, very confusing, and very not worth all of the time that I put into it. At this point, this is the only Shauna McGuire book that I think I've ever read, so it makes me a little skeptical to go into any other books by her, especially because I know a lot of them have that kind of weird abstract element of it, which I'm still trying to figure out if I like that. For the most part, I'm thinking that I actually like weird things that are explainable, whether it's actually science fiction where it's science-based, or where the end reveal is that it's not, you know, all that mysterious to begin with. But this doesn't do that, and so I think I'm finding out that that's just not my type of book. This one I also ended up rating 3 stars. And then getting into the new release books, so all of the books that were released in 2020 that I thought would be 5 stars. First one is Be Not Far From Me by Mindy McGinnis. I love Mindy McGinnis as an author. She writes hard-hitting YA books, contemporary, and this specifically is about this teenage girl who is on a camping trip with her friends, and she gets separated from them and does something to her leg and basically has to survive on her own and get back to safety. And with that in mind as the premise, if you go in expecting just that, you will be satisfied. But for me, unfortunately, it didn't do anything more that I was really looking for, and so that's why I only gave it 3 stars. 2 of Mindy McGinnis's books that I love are The Female of the Species and Heroine, and both of those go into some really deep and heavy subject matter when it comes to the main characters, the teenagers, really figuring out themselves and going through issues that test them as people. And although this definitely tested our main character, it tested her in more of a physical way and less of a, you know, coming of age way. I don't know. And it was also just very short, and so I felt like I just needed more in order to really connect to the story and the character. So again, 3 star. The next book that I talked about is Home Before Dark by Riley Sager. So this was Riley Sager's most recent thriller. He writes mystery thrillers that are very, very popular on BookTube, and I have loved every single one of them. All of them I think have been either 4 or 5 stars. So I was expecting this one to be obviously 5 stars, and it was. I'm so happy that I finally get to say that I was right and my 5-star prediction was correct. This was easily a 5-star book. So this is about this woman who, when she was a child, her family lived in this house that was supposedly haunted, and they only lasted there for, I think it was like 10 days or something before they left. And then her dad had written a book about their time at that house and what really happened, and it kind of blew up. This girl became famous for her family's story, and it's about her going back to that house as an adult and really figuring what happened. And for me, it did everything I look for in a thriller. I was scared, kind of on the edge of my seat as I was reading it. I was interested. There was a past and present timeline, and I was interested in both timelines in the book. And then there were twists and turns that completely satisfied me, and I loved the ending, and so it was perfect. 5 stars for sure. The next book that I talked about is another mystery, and that is 8 Perfect Murders by Peter Swanson. So this is about a man who works in a bookstore, I think, and he had written an article about 8 perfect murders in literature, and he kind of dug into what made them perfect, and then he is being investigated by the police because somebody is seemingly taking his list and recreating each of those perfect murders in real life. There were a couple things that I was hoping for more of in this book. One was the thrill. It was much more of a mystery than a thriller. I was hoping for more suspense, more action, but it was pretty slow moving. And then I think I was looking for more out of the murders themselves, or the description of the perfect murders. As someone who hadn't read, I don't think, any of the murders that were referenced, I would have liked to feel more of a connection, and I don't know if that was on me, that I should have, you know, read all of those books first before going into this so I knew the background of the murders, or if I expected the book to tell me. But for me, it was just something that sounded better kind of in theory than it actually worked out in execution. So for me, it was a 3-star, middle of the road mystery thriller. Couldn't really recommend it too highly. The next book that I talked about is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is an adult romance, and why I thought this would really work for me is because I had heard that it is a darker, more hard-hitting emotional romance. I really like reading about adults falling in love who are going through harder, more adult issues, and I was told that this is what that was, and for the most part, I would agree. I did give this book 4 stars, so I really did enjoy it, and I thought it was a fun, satisfying read. I enjoyed a lot of what the main characters went through. The only thing really keeping it from a 5-star from me was that super deep connection that makes me like want to almost cry while reading it. And there are only a few adult romances that have done that for me, but at this point that's kind of my standard for what I'm looking for in a 5-star romance. So this didn't give me quite that, but it was still a good read, and so I gave it 4 stars, and I'm happy that I at least enjoyed it for the most part. And then the very last book that I had put on this list is Lucky Caller by Emma Mills, and to be completely honest, I don't really know why I put this on here. I have read one other Emma Mills, and that was Foolish Hearts, and I did give that one 5 stars. But Emma Mills writes mostly YA contemporary, and I think what I had said in my previous video was that something about her writing gave me a really nostalgic feel for books that I had read when I was, you know, a teenager, reading and relating to these YA stories. And now, having read another one, I think it was just the Foolish Hearts plot specifically that did something for me, because that one was about these teenagers performing in like a school play or something, and I don't know why, but that one really just made me nostalgic, and still makes me feel nostalgic when I think about it. That book was really great. And then this one, while I can't say anything bad about it, I just had nothing like that to connect to. This one is about these teenagers in high school who are given this assignment to do like a radio program, kind of like make a podcast. And so this one felt a lot more, you know, modern. I didn't relate to this story at all, or what these characters were going through, just because podcasts are such a thing of, you know, now, not when I was in high school. So definitely can't say anything bad about this book. That is a reason I didn't give it 5 stars. It just didn't hit me or connect with me in the same way as Foolish Hearts did. It was just a little too surface level and juvenile, so I gave it 3 stars. So with all of that being said, clearly I was not accurate. Only one of the 10 books that I predicted to be 5 stars was actually 5 stars, which is not great. And then 2 were 4 stars, only 1 was 2 stars, but then the rest were 3 stars. So clearly I did not know my taste that well. I do think if I were going back now and picking and choosing whether I thought, you know, these books or these types of books or these authors would be 5 stars for me, I would change my mind before even reading them. I probably will do another 5-star predictions video in the near future because 1, they're fun to make, but 2, to kind of prove that maybe I have honed in my reading preferences a little bit more within the last year. So we will see if that's true. Let me know if you were, I don't know, surprised by any of these. If you've tried predicting your own 5-star books before, were you good at that? Were they accurate for you? I don't know if this is just something I jumped the gun on a little bit in predicting, or if it's just something I'm bad at. I don't know, but still a fun experiment to do nonetheless, and I'm glad to have read these books anyway. But with that, I don't have anything else, so thank you so much for watching this video, and I will see you in my next one.